The Mariners shouldn't trade hitting prospects because it's their only way of acquiring hitters. We watched this offseason. Pete Alonso waited on the market for a long time. Were the Mariners actually interested in him? Did they ever give him a formal offer? I don't know. But what I'll tell you is I don't think Pete Alonso was interested in the Mariners. Alex Bregman was on the market for a long time. The idea, the Red Sox signed him to a pretty team-friendly deal, like a deal that gives them a lot of flexibility in the upcoming years. Would he have signed that deal with the Mariners? Unless he's completely stupid, absolutely not. Hey folks, it's the Poor Sports Seattle podcast. This is your host, Casey McLean. By the way, please come see me do stand-up comedy. You can find dates realistically, it's a Casey McLean comedy on Instagram is where I'm promoting most of my shows. Please come out to those. Today I want to talk about a topic and that's why I got the plugs out early, because I want to talk about a topic that's going to be unpopular. I have this problem with my brain that is really not beneficial on the internet. In my opinion, most of the folks that get successful doing sports content on the internet are cheerleaders for the team that they root for. And maybe some of them are critical, but I think that's going away. Like I was a journalism student in college, and the guys that I admired a lot that were doing like internet journalism or internet commentary at the time were like USS Mariner and the early days of Lookout Landing, the guys that were really analyzing without bias the actions of their bias was that they wanted the Mariners to win, but there wasn't a bias towards making content that made Mariners fans feel good about the team's chance to win. That Mariners content that never re-examined itself. That never went, like, I remember there was, so Dave Cameron famously in analytics circles ranked the Mariners when Jack Zarenzik was their GM, and they had, I can't remember his name now, Jerry McNamara? No, that was a point guard for Syracuse. The Tom McNamara, I think it was Tom McNamara, was the Mariners, like their head scout or their farm system director, and he ranked the Mariners as having the 6th best organization from a resources and talent, front office, coaching staff standpoint. And then the Mariners went into a tailspin after that. This was following the year where the Mariners traded J.J. Putz, I believe, for the combination of players that would become, it was like Franklin Gutierrez, I believe, was in that deal. Maybe he wasn't. A bunch of players that were very useful for the Mariners. And things were looking up. Looked like the Mariners were headed into a period of sustained success, and they didn't. And what I really respected about Dave Cameron, who I believe is he's definitely worked for Major League Baseball teams. I want to say he might work for the Mariners right now, but what I respected about that is his ability to go back and reflect on that and talk about maybe the flaws in the process. And also, by the way, the ways that the process was not flawed, but how everything in the world is just a series of probabilities, and we don't have control over the exact outcome. And I think decoupling results from process will help you have a better process. So do we think that Jerry Dipoto or any GM in baseball has some magic, innate understanding and can make a one-to-one who's going to be a great prospect and who isn't? Of course not. Great prospects slip by every GM, right? Mike Trout got drafted like 19th. And by the way, my understanding is, I think it's Tom, I better look up if it's Tom McNamara or not. But my understanding from the time, because I was writing for Prospect Insider at the time, was, hold on, Tom McNamara, 41st mayor of Illinois. That's not who I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay. Tom McNamara was director of amateur scouting. At a time with the Mariners. I don't know if he was during the Zarenzik years, all of the Zarenzik years. But the point is, the just because the Tom McNamara doesn't have a special eye. Jerry Dipoto doesn't have a special eye. And my understanding at the time, to get back to it, I made the connection back. Holy moly. My brain is operating at like 60% capacity right now. Tom McNamara wanted to draft Mike Trout. I believe he got drafted the same year as... What year did Mike Trout get drafted? Maybe the same year as Danny Holtzen? Could that be right? Whatever year he got drafted. Maybe it was Jeff... No, it couldn't have been Jeff Clement. What year did Mike Trout get drafted? I was going to make this concise, like we're gonna talk about this one topic, and now we're diving into rabbit holes immediately. I was going to try to make this, we're going to go like fully produced Dan Viens of Seattle, of Seahawks Forever fame style product, and now we're deep into a rabbit hole already. Let's find out what year Mike Trout got drafted and see who the Mariners drafted that year, because the point that I'm getting to is, so he was drafted in the 2009 Major League Baseball draft. Oh boy, who did the Mariners draft that? Dustin Ackley at number 2. Yeah, it looks like it was Dustin Ackley at number 2. And Trout goes number 25 to the Angels. The Mariners, yeah, my understanding was there was a push from the scouting department to draft Trout, number 2 overall, and they lost out. Dustin Ackley was considered a can't-miss prospect at the time, and he obviously was not. All this is to say, this is a very unpopular opinion that I have, which is that the Mariners should not be trading their hitting prospects to acquire short-term talent for this year's playoff push. And there's a couple reasons for that. We're going to talk about them philosophically, and we're going to talk about them pragmatically. Philosophically, I think that the Mariners are not very high on their win curve right now. They have, like, last time I checked, they have like a 4% chance of winning the World Series. To me, the goal of the Mariners should be to win the World Series. And that should be the goal that they're working towards. I don't think that's always been true. I think very often the Mariners have been guilty of trying to play for a team who is in playoff contention, who appears in the playoffs perpetually, but not really. They don't really care if they want the team to sell tickets through September as opposed to have great success in October. And they've come so close so many years. The Mariners are a couple bounces away from a team that made the playoffs, I want to say like 5 or 6 times in the last decade. And it turns out they had this long drought and missed the playoffs for 20 straight years. So 20 plus straight years. So that's my philosophy. That's what I would like to see, is the Mariners to play to win a World Series. And I'm 39 years old. I can wait a little bit. I'm fine with the Mariners taking some time and building an organization that can sustain multiple shots at winning the World Series, as opposed to a team that is going to go all in, sacrifice the future, and be 10 years removed from the next deep farm system, deep organization that can make a consistent playoff push, that can become a perennial contender. Because to me, the way you become a World Series champion, the best way to do it is to be a perennial contender. To have one shot at it, to go after it like the Tampa Bay Rays every 5 years, or the Oakland A's, or the whatever they are now, the Athletics at a time when they were a little more successful as a franchise. That's not what I want. I want what the Houston Astros did, outside of the banging on trash cans. I want a team that can lose somebody, that can lose a Garrett Cole and sustain, that can lose a who's another good example? I don't have a good example off the top of my head. It's the morning, by the way, when I'm recording this. So the Mariners right now, playoff odds, I think, are like 60%. We'll look at this real quick just to be sure. And they have massive holes. And they have holes that didn't seem like holes a couple weeks ago. I looked it up yesterday, and I'm not sure if the numbers, I don't think the numbers change a ton. So first off, the Mariners 61.8% playoff odds. I looked up yesterday what Jorge Polanco has done since May 1st or something like that. He's been abysmal. Incredible April for Jorge Polanco, 48 WRC plus since then. Like a 200 plus WRC plus in April, 48 WRC plus since then. That's unrosterable at a DH spot. And he's been batting in the 4-hole. This is he either has to get right or he's gone. I thought Donovan Solano might end up being the next Mariner that gets moved. And by the way, my doubting of a Mariner has been the kiss of life for these guys. Not the kiss of death, the kiss of life. Mitch Garver, I doubted. Mitch Garver has in the last 2 weeks, has like a 200 plus WRC plus. Donovan Solano has been hitting the shit out of the ball. So, Placido. I'm going to probably call him Placido Polanco the entire time he's a Mariner. Jorge Polanco is unrosterable at his present production level. So the Mariners have holes. They have holes everywhere. And I want to talk about who they should not trade. I also want to talk about why it doesn't really matter if for most of these players you're like, well, they don't need a shortstop. They have J.P. Crawford. They have Cole Young. Well, you can never have enough shortstops. You can never have enough center fielders. And we're going to talk about that. But the reason is because those guys very often move off of those positions and become valuable big leaguers at other positions. So the first thing we're going to take a look at here is this is the Mariners list of top prospects according to Fangraphs. They have it down to 29. I cut it off at 40 future value. And I'm going to do a quick synopsis of what future value means here in this right column. If you're watching, is the Major League Baseball scouting scale. 50 means average big leaguer, and then everything below is like a notch below. So it would be like if you're familiar with the concept of a standard deviation, every 10 would be like a standard deviation. So 40 is like a standard deviation below 50, and then the ones in the middle are like in the middle. 45 plus is a cop-out. It's like would be like a 47.5 that they don't want to put. I kind of like the imprecision of Major League Baseball scouting because I think that it gives a better view of what this like series of probabilities things look like. So basically, from the Fangraphs perspective, there are 6 prospects in the Mariners system that have an expected future value of 50. Just 50. And those are, I said I was going to figure out his name. Oh, shit. Let's find a pronunciation guide for the ambidextrous pitcher, just so I don't embarrass myself here. How do we pronounce this? I'm listening to it on... No, what are you doing? This pronunciation guides are too sexy. The voices are too sexy. I'm trying to listen to one and not share it. It is Herangelo Sanjay. Okay. That's what we're going with. Herangelo Sanjay. Boy, what a diversion. Let's get back to the prospect list. I didn't go off the screen. I was looking off the screen. Herangelo Sanjay is the sole pitcher in that top 6 group. The other guys are Felnine Celestine, Johnny Farmelo, Harry Ford, Cole Young, Colt Emerson. Laz Montez barely misses. I saw a really fun Laz Montez comp, and now I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it was just like a big hitter. What was that guy's name that played for the oh my God. I could click the thing. These are the 6 guys. I don't know why I wanted this to be so professional and so clean and polished, and it's not coming out that way. So Laz Montez just outside this group, a guy who's got questions about his body, who's got questions about his health, who's got questions about his position. But I want to look at this group because I could see looking at this list and going, well, there's a shortstop and a second base at the top of this list. No need to keep Felnine Celestine. No need to keep Michael Arroyo. That's not how baseball works. These guys can come off of these positions and play other positions. Shortstops very often move over to second base. They move over to third base. They move to the outfield. I'm going to pull up a list in a little bit of guys that have made that transition, not only former Mariners, but guys who are Hall of Famers, guys. It is not uncommon for a player. It's like on your Little League team. I mean, that's frankly as simplified as it has to be. Is on your Little League team, very often the best players played pitcher, shortstop, and center field. Pitcher, shortstop, maybe second base if you had a good shortstop, and center field. And then the worse the players got, they moved out from those positions. A guy who was big and tall but couldn't move very well played first base. A guy who was really bad probably played left field. A guy who was less bad but not very good played right field. I played a little bit of that in my later years of baseball, by the way. So this isn't like a concept that should be that, but it's very hard sometimes for people to uncompartmentalize, to not put Colt Emerson as a shortstop by name right now. Colt Emerson might be a third baseman by the time he comes to the big leagues. He might be a left fielder, might be a second baseman. We don't know. He's 19 years old. His body's going to mature. His musculature is going to change. His entire body is going to change a ton between now and when he makes his big league debut, including, by the way, if his big league debut is this year and next year. So, the one thing I would say when you're looking at this prospect list is divorce yourself from these positions, except for, I'm going to make the exception for two guys on this list. Harry Ford and Tyler Locklear. Because, and by the way, this is the lowest I've seen Tyler Locklear on a prospect list. And I think it's accurately rated. A guy who is a minor league first baseman has nowhere to go defensively. There's no, he might move off of the position to something else. That's the last stop before DH. So for the reason this is important, and it's good for these guys to see them starting out at more difficult positions, is Tyler Locklear is going to have to essentially be one of the top 60 hitters in baseball to be a good first baseman. And that's probably not even correct. It's probably even higher than that, because first base is full of a bunch of guys that couldn't play other positions but could hit pretty well. That's what DH is too, by the way. It's some teams use their DH a little bit differently, but these are guys, this position has to hit. You don't have to hit that well to be a good shortstop. If you're a 100 WRC plus, a league average offensive shortstop, that's a very good offensive shortstop, because shortstops on average don't hit that great. This is why, I mean, it's very remarkable what Cal Raleigh's doing, but Harry Ford does not have the profile of a guy who's going to come in and be Edgar Martinez or Bryce Harper, or Bryce Harper, by the way, is a guy that played catcher and moved on to another position, ended up playing it pretty well. Harry Ford does not have that luxury. Harry Ford is a fringe defensive catcher at this point, according to every scouting report. I'm not going to pretend like I'm a guy that's out scouting Harry Ford and going over his mechanics, and a guy who, frankly, I don't think his bat plays at first base or DH in Major League Baseball. Now, that's how I value Harry Ford. If the rest of the world also values Harry Ford that way, bring Harry Ford up. Let's let him get time. Let him be a part-time DH, part-time, the backup catcher. Give Cal more time at DH. Give Cal some time at first base, I would even say. I'm on board with that. I'm on board with giving Cal some reps at first base. Preserve that bat. This dude is the best hitter on the team, by far. You can't afford to lose him, and he's playing the most injury-prone position outside a pitcher on that field. So, but Harry Ford is a rare player that I would say plays a premium defensive position and is fully blocked. I don't really believe in that at any other positions. I think if you're a shortstop, you could be a second baseman, you could be a third baseman, you could probably be an outfielder. We're going to talk, like I said, about players that have done it. So I'm not worried about that. So if I was going to go down this list and look at players, by the way, Ty Pete, drafted as a shortstop, immediately moved to the outfield. He's 9th on the prospect list, 45 plus future value. Guy that I like a lot, by the way. That low key, I'm going to send this man a message and see if he'll appear on this podcast, because very interesting outlook on his offseason training, and a guy that I think I have some belief in, folks, that's a little further down the list. if I'm going down this list, I'm getting to, Ben Williamson is like your primary third baseman at this point. I don't think there's a ton of value in trading Ben Williamson and a very good defender. I'm getting down to maybe Tyler Locklear after Harry Ford. I'm willing to trade Harry Ford for the right package, but it's got to be a guy who's got team control beyond 2025. That's the reality. Because Harry Ford is a major league ready hitter who could probably step in and be, I don't even have an idea who that guy would be, to be honest with you. I don't know who might be available. It's got to, if it was going to be anyone, it would be one of those Baltimore prospects that's also blocked right now. And you always have to be worried about trading prospects for prospects because the other side knows those prospects better than you do. Almost certainly. And we saw that, do you remember when the Mariners traded Michael Pineda for Jesus Montero? It was Michael Pineda and somebody for Jesus Montero and Hector Noesi, I believe. And I thought I was a ride or die for Hector Noesi, and he turned into nothing. But those were two prospects that had massive flaws, and that both their teams knew what those flaws were better than the team acquiring them, and they just traded blows losing that trade. Michael Pineda was injured and ineffective, and I think got suspended for steroids, and Jesus Montero couldn't really play catcher, and his bat never really developed into being good enough to be a DH, but he got run at DH and he got run at catcher, and it was just a bad profile for Jesus Montero ultimately, and the Yankees knew that better than the Mariners did. So I'm not, I'm a little wary of the idea of just basically doing a standoff of Baltimore's internal evaluation versus the Mariners' internal evaluation. But the reason that I would not trade any of these hitting prospects, which we're 21 minutes in, which means that because this is why I'm so bad at everything. This should be in the first 20 seconds. Maybe I put it at the beginning as a stinger and tease people, because this should be in the first 20 seconds. The Mariners shouldn't trade hitting prospects because it's their only way of acquiring hitters. We watched this offseason. Pete Alonso waited on the market for a long time. Were the Mariners actually interested in him? Did they ever give him a formal offer? I don't know. But what I'll tell you is I don't think Pete Alonso was interested in the Mariners. Alex Bregman was on the market for a long time. The idea, the Red Sox signed him to a pretty team-friendly deal, like a deal that gives them a lot of flexibility in the upcoming years. Would he have signed that deal with the Mariners? Unless he's completely stupid, absolutely not. Do you remember when Robinson Cano signed with the Mariners? I believe it was it 12 years, 10 years, $240 million? Robinson Cano contract. 10 years, $240 million. I believe his next best offer, if I read correctly, was $175 million from the Yankees, the team that he already played for. And I'm going to add one layer on top of that, we never get any credit in Washington State when it comes to athletes for the fact that there's no state income tax in Washington State. We never get enough credit for that. There's no state income tax in Washington State, which means playing in Washington State is like another bump of whatever percentage. I don't know what the percentage is in New York. So the Mariners had to overpay, not is it an overpay? I think Robinson Cano was worth the money, whatever, blah, 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 blah. However, Cano took a deal that was $65 million, basically 33% more than, a little more, like 35% more than the deal the Yankees offered. That's what it took to get him to Seattle from New York. Now, New York is obviously a better like cultural environment for players coming from Latin America. There's a lot more Latin American community there, and Latin American culture there, Latin American food and entertainment and all that stuff. It's New York. It's the melting pot, right? It's a further flight from his family, no matter how you cut it. And Seattle's very remote. But Seattle, so for hitters, Seattle is a difficult sell. And especially, by the way, we saw the Mariners go out and sign Adrian Beltre and sign Richie Sexson. Beltre had an admirable Mariners career. And by the end of his career, we learned to appreciate him because he was a Gold Glove defensive third baseman that was still pretty good offensively. He never matched that big, 48 home run year he had under questionable, I would say, at a time when a big home run surge was suspicious for anybody. But those guys signed life-changing contracts. They signed potentially career-ending contracts, the contracts that could have been the final contract they signed. Beltre went on to sign another couple deals, I think, and he was really young. But in those cases, I believe the Mariners had to overpay also. The Mariners have to overpay for hitters. And at this point, not only do they have to overpay, but they have to commit to more years than other teams. It's not just an annual salary thing. This is my perception anyway, from the level of interest they've shown and the level of reciprocated interest they've received from hitters. It's tough to get guys to take the Mariners' money to be hitters in T-Mobile Park. And it takes signing a guy to a potential, you need leverage. So is it a guy that you're going to sign? Would you have been willing to sign Alex Bregman to a 10-year, $400 million deal? If you were, he probably signs in Seattle. I don't really want him to do that. I don't really want them to sign him to that kind of deal. Would you, as a fan, have wanted the deal that the Red Sox signed Alex Bregman to? Absolutely. But he wasn't going to sign that deal in Seattle. You're not coming to Seattle to make a platform year for a future contract. You have to have leverage. Cal Raleigh. And we're going to talk about Cal Raleigh as the time goes on. I'm not super interested in the MVP debate. I think it's a worn out discussion. But Cal Raleigh was a couple years away from free agency. The team had leverage against him. I don't know. They had leverage over Julio Rodriguez. They were able to guarantee him a prosperous future financially. And that's leverage. Alex Bregman doesn't need that money, and he's got money, and he's on a free market. He doesn't have to take the Mariners' money. The Red Sox money spends the same. And coming to Seattle as a hitter is like career suicide potentially. So that's why it's difficult. That's why I think the Mariners' sole method of efficiently acquiring hitters is through the draft, through amateur signings, through prospect signings, and that's why I'm worried about the team, unless it's someone further down this list. And Tyler Locklear is a guy I do not value, a mid-organization first baseman. I would trade Tyler Locklear for any one of those Baltimore guys that I talked about in earlier weeks. Ryan O'Hearn. I think I might have called Ryan Healy, who I believe is another Major League Baseball player. Ryan O'Hearn, Cedric Mullins, what's the dude? Brian Boxer. I'd like to see a package of those guys. It would have to be a pretty damn good package to get rid of Harry Ford for me. It also sounds, by the way, like the Mariners are willing to take on some salary at the deadline. That's great. That's a virtue at the deadline. It's not necessarily going to be. There's a lot of competition these years in these expanded wildcard years. There's a lot of teams that are in contention. It is harder and harder to get a contributor for cheap. Let's take a look at this next slide. So these are players, I promised this earlier, these are players who have made the transition from a middle infield spot to another position. And I'm sure there's other good examples, but Alex Rodriguez obviously comes up with the Mariners, plays shortstop with the Mariners, plays shortstop with the Rangers, ends up with the Yankees where they have Derek Jeter, moves to third base successfully. Mike Schmidt, by the way, played his entire first minor league season as a shortstop, ends up one of the greatest third basemen of all time, if not the greatest third baseman of all time. Cal Ripken Jr., same thing, plays some shortstop, moves over to third base. Chipper Jones moves to third base. Here's some other ones. Miguel Cabrera, the big, lumbering first baseman, most famously with the Detroit Tigers at this point, but comes up with the Marlins. Plays I believe his entire first minor league season was at shortstop. Never played shortstop in the majors, but played several years at third base, played several years in the outfield, over almost 350 games in the outfield before he finally got so big that it was just not going to work out in the outfield anymore, and he moved to first base permanently. But if the bat plays, you can move these guys to other positions. It's not a death sentence if this dude cannot become if he can't become a shortstop. Even though that's what you signed him as, it's not a death sentence. If the bat's good enough, and a lot of times, this is the thing that makes these guys valuable and interesting is the athletic profile required to be a good big league shortstop is like the athletic profile required to be a guard in the NBA. Meaning, it takes a certain amount of speed, agility, reaction time. Your bat doesn't have to be as good, but you still have to be able to hit a baseball. But then for the body type that typically creates a power hitter is usually lacking all of those things. It's usually lacking speed, agility, reaction time in the field. So when a guy like Alex Rodriguez hits as well as an elite first baseman, is one of the league's very best hitters, and also can capably play the hardest position on the field, it's a massive bonus. But the bat was so good that he could move to other positions. Miguel Cabrera is a good example. Billy Hamilton was a shortstop, and I didn't even look this one up. This is off of memory. This specific one's off of memory. I didn't even look it up. Was a shortstop prospect with the Reds, ends up coming up and being one of the best defensive outfielders in baseball. Ty Pete moved to the outfield. Is he going to stick at center field? We don't know. Is he going to be great out there? We don't know, but this is a very common path, is for a guy to come up, for the team to very quickly realize, and they probably realized before they acquired him, shortstop isn't in his long-term future, but this guy has an athletic profile that can move to the outfield, and a guy that can play shortstop at a high level, high school and college, probably has enough baseball IQ to just make the move to center field and be very good. Another guy that started out as a shortstop, BJ Upton, was first overall pick with the Rays. I believe spent a fair amount of time as the baseball's number one prospect, and I would say his brother Justin might have had a more celebrated career, but BJ had a pretty damn good big league career. And then some Mariners notable guys. I have Ty Pete at the bottom of the list. Adam Jones was a shortstop prospect, ends up becoming a pretty good center fielder. And Kyle Seager played a little bit of everywhere in the minors, and actually in his first couple years played a little bit of everywhere. He played, I want to say, like 11 games at shortstop in his rookie year. But his first year in the minors, he played almost exclusively or primarily second base. And at North Carolina with Dustin Ackley played center field, by the way, and Seager was a second baseman, and they moved him to third base because the bat was good enough to stick at third base. Now, I have some wonders about Kyle Seager if they could have put him at second base or even spent some time at shortstop. If Kyle Seager could have been a Ben Zobrist type, I've already given the Ben Zobrist type title to Dylan Moore, which is probably unfair. There was someone else. Oh, I have some ideas for future single topic episodes like this, and boy, do I have another one that's going to be unpopular. Look out for that. It might end up being in the off season because it's just like too out of place and will be too unpopular. So again, my point is these dudes can move off of this position. Do not get hung up on the idea that the Mariners have too many shortstops in their system, because a shortstop in single A is very often not going to be a shortstop by the time he makes the majors. Okay. So this is, and I want to say something about Fangraph's prospect system. A couple things I like about it. One, it's based on analytics. I prefer analytics. Two, it is free to the public to look at, which I don't think there is a prospect system out there, a prospect list generation system out there, be it Baseball America or whoever, ESPN, that is worth paying for compared to the free Fangraphs scouting reports. I think their methodology, I believe in their methodology, but two, they're very informative and they're very interesting. So this is Harry Ford's scouting report as of, by the way, this is as of June 2025. So these are very recently updated scouting reports. And remember, 50 is average. They give Harry Ford a 50 raw power average. I'll tell you this. I saw Harry Ford hit a home run at Cheney Stadium. I think his raw power is higher than 50. Now, can he harness that? Their next stat is game power, which means how can he use that power in a game on a consistent basis? I don't know. I am personally pretty bearish on Harry Ford as a bat-only prospect. And I've heard a variety of opinions on his defense, but I think that the general consensus is that his defense is questionable. That it might get there, but it's not like this dude comes up and he's immediately a Molina brother. It's just not the case. It's not going to be the case for Harry Ford. Harry Ford is going to come up and be a project. And a guy who is a marginal defensive catcher, who's a DH only that doesn't hit for a ton of power. There's a lot of ranting and raving about how great the quality of his eye, his understanding of the strike zone, his ability to work the strike zone. That might all be true. Some of that falls off when you don't hit for power. You start seeing quality pitches in the zone more often, is my estimation. I think it's borne out in stats, by the way. But also, doesn't that profile sound like Jesus Montero? I'm not saying he's Jesus Montero. I think Harry Ford is a better athlete, and I think being a better athlete means that there's a chance that he can stick a catcher and be a quality catcher, be an average or better catcher. Maybe he could find another position to play. But it's a scary profile to me, especially a guy who is blocked at his natural position. It's a scary profile to me. You can read through this. This is if you want to pause and read this, this is the Fangraphs scouting report of him. You can also find it at Fangraphs. I would say Eric Longenhagen is a little more generous to Ford's defense than I've seen other people be, which is interesting. Whether or not, but here's good. His caught stealing rate is 19%. So that's not the only stat that matters for catchers, but it's I think a good example of the scouting report is Harry Ford has a rocket arm. But what the stats show is that minor league base runners steal on him at a high rate. Let's go to the next. The next one is going to be, do I not? I thought I put Tyler Locklear's in. I guess I didn't. That's fine. Tyler Locklear is a first base only, bottom of the top 30 list prospect who I just don't think there's any value in losing sleep over Tyler Locklear. I don't like that style of prospect who's first base only. This was my problem with Evan White. This is my problem with Dominic Smith, who actually got waived recently. Like, these are guys who, if you have one position, even this is, by the way, why I don't like the idea of the Mariners drafting like relievers super high. They drafted Josh Fields many years ago, and it's like, you know who would make very good relievers? Failed starters. You know who some of the best closers in baseball history are? Maybe all of the best closers just about in baseball history are failed starters. So, anyway, the Mariners cannot acquire hitters any other way than through the draft and through amateur free agency, basically, in no efficient way. And as they move on as they get past the 2025 season, I don't want this cupboard to be bare. And I'll also say this. This doesn't mean that every one of those prospects, let's go back to that we'll go back to that first page. This does not mean that Colt Emerson and Cole Young and Harry Ford and Johnny Farmelo and Felton Celestine and Laz Montes and Ty Pete, like every one of these guys is going to hit. And just because the Mariners trade that guy doesn't mean he's going to hit. And just because the Mariners trade that guy doesn't mean he's going to flop. And just because the Mariners keep a guy doesn't mean either of those things. All these guys represent some probability of being a good big league player. But the Mariners have no other legitimate options, or at least to maybe make it the most accurate. This front office does not have other legitimate options. Of course, the team could go out and spend a whole bunch of money. They could have given Alex Bregman $50 million a year for 10 years, and certainly I think he would have signed in Seattle. But then they wouldn't have been able to spend forever. And Alex Bregman, yes, he's played well in Boston for stretches. I actually haven't looked at him recently. There was a point where he was not doing great and a point where he was absolutely murdering the ball. And I think he's been injured also. But you cannot build a team with $50 million a year salaries. There's no team in baseball that's sitting on 25, 26, $50 million a year salaries. So you have to build it through the farm system, and the Mariners, especially when it comes to hitters, have to. And I'd be more inclined to have the Mariners trade from the bottom of this top 29 list that I only showed 24 of when it comes to hitters, and I'd be even more inclined to see them use, if they're going to use prospects to acquire talent, use these pitchers. Because the one market advantage the Mariners have is that their ballpark caters to mediocre, average, slightly above average pitchers better than any ballpark in baseball.